There are men who are feared for their strength, and others for the silence they carry. Not because it's empty, but because of what's buried beneath it. In a village tucked between mountains and myths, there lived a man, shaped like stone, but shattered like glass. Not by war, not by hatred, but by something most would have called a blessing. Every woman who touched his skin ran, not because of who he was, but because of what the gods had given him. So he waited. Years passed, alone, adored by many, held by none, until one night, beneath a full moon, beside a river that remembered names long forgotten, he met a woman who didn't run. This is not a tale of lust. It is not a tale of pity. This is the story of Maleko, a man whose burden became his gift, and the woman who chose to stay. Welcome to Tales of Black, where every silence holds a scream, and every legend begins with a truth no one dared to speak. Some are born to carry glory, some to carry pain, and some are born with a gift from the gods, a gift they'll spend their whole lives unsure whether to praise or curse. His name was Maleko. They called him the Man of Kisanga Mountain because his frame looked carved from the granite peaks themselves, shoulders as broad as the planks used to carry harvest during the dry season, a chest like the rain drums of the village priest, and eyes always warm, but always quiet. Maleko was not a proud man. He was the one who carried water for the elderly, the one who repaired roofs for widows after the storms, the one who showed up, first and silent, whenever the village needed strength. But no one truly knew him, no one touched him, no one stayed. Maleko is a good man. Everyone said it. But that sentence always came with a sigh, a shake of the head, a silence too heavy for a compliment. Because in the village of Ntoba, everyone knew Maleko carried something beyond human, a body that made women tremble, a blessing no one could accept. When Maleko was 16, a girl once tried to grow close, just once. After that, she didn't speak for 3 whole rainy seasons. Her family sent her away to live with distant relatives in the town of Kansi. No one ever mentioned it again. Then came another girl, and another. Each time, Maleko grew quieter, laughed less, and his eyes, still warm, began to feel as distant as mountains burning at sunset. The men envied his form. The women avoided him, yet still peeked at him through their windows when he passed. The children adored him. They followed him like small birds follow eagles. They called him the one who carries thunder. Because once, after a storm, they saw him lift an entire fallen tree from the village path with his bare hands. The village priest once said, "There are gifts meant to serve, not to be loved." Maleko heard those words when he was 13, and he believed them for nearly 20 years, until she arrived, Zahira. If Maleko was the mountain, Zahira was the mist. No one knew where she came from. She spoke little, her eyes deep, like a well with no bottom. And when she walked, there was no sound, only the whisper of her red dress brushing the earth. Maleko saw her for the first time during the rain-calling ceremony. She stood behind the women offering prayers. She didn't sing, she didn't dance, she only watched. But in that gaze, Maleko felt like his entire body had been tied up by something ancient, something soft, and for the first time in years, he wanted someone to stay. "I am Maleko." He spoke quietly after the ceremony, when he met her near the spring. Zahira looked at him and smiled, light as wind on skin. "I know," she said. "I have nothing but a heart. And a burden people call a gift." "I don't fear burdens," Zahira replied. "I only fear the ones who pretend they don't carry them." That night, Maleko didn't sleep, because for the first time in his life, he thought about something he never dared to believe before. Maybe the gods weren't wrong. Maybe that gift was never meant to be carried alone. Maybe It was waiting for her. There are women who belong nowhere, not because they're unworthy of love, but because they haven't yet found a place that knows how to love them. Right, Zahira was one of them. She arrived in Ntoba during the dry wind season, with nothing but 3 faded shawls, a small drum strapped to her hip, and a gaze that made even elder men bow their heads. No one knew where she came from. Rumor had it, she once served as a scent keeper at the temple of Kamolu, an ancient shrine where women never married. They said she had spirit blood in her veins, something no man should touch unless he wished to have his soul drained. But Zahira wasn't like the stories. She lived quietly on the edge of the forest, grew herbs, healed the sick, and only spoke to children, the elderly, and Maleko. Maleko came to see her for the first time at dawn. He brought a bundle of dry firewood and a basket of corn. She asked no questions. She didn't even thank him, just gave a small nod, then walked back inside. But from that day on, he came every morning, and Zahira, though she said nothing, left the door open. They never talked about pain. They never spoke of burdens or bodies. They talked about the sky, about birds that flew against the wind, about ancient songs said to turn the moon red, and about dreams. No one dared to say out loud. Zahira didn't smile often, but when she did, just a little, Maleko felt like he was touching the one thing he had feared most his whole life: hope. The village began to whisper, "Is she planning to stay? Does she even know about that? Or maybe she's like him, carrying something the gods sent down as a test." Zahira heard it all, but she never responded, except once. When a group of young women laughed behind her back at the market, she stopped, turned around, and said, "If you knew what it feels like to go every day without being able to touch another soul, and still find a reason to smile, maybe you'd shut your mouths." The whole market went silent. No one dared to gossip after that. Maleko loved Zahira, not with sweet words, but with presence. He sat beside her every evening. No demands, no questions, just silence. As if silence was the love language of those who never learned how to say, "I love you." One night, under a full moon and wind sharp enough to cut skin, Zahira spoke. "Do you know why I stayed?" "What?" "Because you didn't touch me, like a starving man. I'm just afraid you'll disappear." "I still might. But I want to see if a man who carries too much can still love like someone who has nothing at all." Maleko said nothing. It was the first time he saw himself, not in a mirror but in someone's eyes. Not as a rumor, not as a burden, just as Maleko. A few weeks later, they became engaged. The whole village came to the ceremony. No one said anything, but everyone watched. Some secretly hoped for a miracle. Others thought, "There goes another one. She'll run too." Zahira knew. Maleko knew. But that night, they still exchanged gifts, still danced, and still believed. "This time might be different. If you're not afraid of me," Maleko said, "then maybe you're the first to ever love the part of me the world has always refused to touch." Wedding nights in Ntoba weren't like anywhere else. There were no white veils, no champagne, just fire. A sacred circle of flames lit in the center of the red dirt yard. And the priest's only blessing: touch each other with your souls first before your skin. As the villagers trickled home after the wedding, the drums faded, leaving only glowing embers whispering in the dark. Maleko and Zahira walked toward the bamboo hut draped in red cloth, the place they would now share. He walked slowly. She walked even slower. No words were spoken. But in the stillness they could hear each other's heartbeat, loud as thunder. Inside, Zahira lit a candle with the ceremonial flame. Its light danced across the woven walls, casting their shadows like two spirits, merging. Maleko sat near the small hearth, removed the worn leather bracelet from his wrist, his ancestral charm since he was 9, and placed it on the wooden table. A small act, but one that felt like shedding the last layer of armor. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said, eyes fixed on the fire. Zahira said nothing, then stepped closer, placed her hand on his shoulder. For the first time, like one might touch a mountain just to see if it would crumble. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, like a vow. Maleko turned to her, looked into her eyes. For the first time, his gaze wasn't gentle. It was deep. So deep, like a man about to be swept away, not by lust, but by something fiercer. Hope. They began like strangers discovering a shared language. Soft touches, slow breaths, a rhythm found between two silences. Zahira didn't flinch, not at first, until she saw it. The thing whispered in stories. The thing many had dismissed as exaggeration. But it was real, so vivid, so overwhelming. She stepped back. Once, then again. The magic in her eyes faded, replaced by panic. "Zahira," Maleko whispered, his hand still extended. No, this isn't for ordinary people," she stammered, pressing her back against the hut wall. "Don't be scared, I won't—" Maleko began to step forward. "No, stop!" Her scream tore through the forest night. She ran, barefoot, her dress half loose. The dry earth cracked beneath each step. Fabric ripped in rhythm with her breath. Maleko didn't chase her. He stood still, like a tree struck by lightning in clear sky, not falling, but burning, quietly. Outside, the village had yet to fall asleep. The feast still lingered in their bones, but the scream cut through the air. Torches were lit. Footsteps rushed toward the red hut, and there they found her, Zahira, curled on the ground, eyes rolled back, breathing ragged, her face stunned, as if she had just seen something not meant for this world. No one said a word. No one dared ask. Only one old woman whispered, her eyes fixed on the hut. Another one, who couldn't bear the weight. The next morning, Zahira left Ntoba. No farewell, no goodbye, no turning back. Just a single cloth hung at the hut's entrance, the same one she used to carry her drum. Maleko took it down, folded it carefully, like an apology no one had the courage to speak, then walked back inside, alone, again. Some nights never see morning, and some men were never meant to be loved, only remembered as a warning. Some secrets don't need to be told. They reveal themselves, like blood seeping into dry soil after a sudden storm. And in Ntoba, nothing spreads faster than a rumor. That morning, before the sun had fully risen, the village already knew. Zahira was gone. No one saw her leave, but everyone knew she wasn't coming back. And everyone knew why. Another one. They come, they leave. What Maleko carries was never meant for human hands. Maybe it really is a curse. By midday, their wedding night had become legend. Some claimed Zahira ran from the hut like she was possessed. Others swore they saw her weeping blood. A child insisted they heard screams that didn't sound human. At the market, people began avoiding Maleko's path. Children stopped chasing after him. Even the old women who used to ask him for water turned away when they saw him coming. Maleko said nothing. He still chopped wood, still ground maize for the elderly, still swept the village yard at sunrise like he always had. Only one thing changed. No one looked him in the eye anymore. That night, the elders held a private meeting. Old Lambo, the village's eldest, raised a bowl of offering wine to the sky and said, "A man who carries something no one dares touch may no longer be just a man." The priest, Mba, added, "Perhaps Maleko bears the mark of the serpent god, a life force that must never be shared, without purification." Another elder spoke up. "Maybe he's a warning from the ancestors, that not all beauty is meant to be loved." And so they decided. Maleko would undergo the ritual of truth. If he refused, he would be exiled to prevent further misfortune. The next morning, Maleko was summoned before the ancestral altar. Incense smoke rose in slow, coiling streams, like threads connecting this world to the next. The priest looked at him, not with anger, not with compassion, just with certainty. If you have nothing to hide, then let the ancestors speak for you. Maleko nodded, slowly but without hesitation. The ritual began. Charms, sacred water, drum beats. Ash was pressed onto his forehead. He knelt before the sacred kola tree. Each beat of the drum carried a question from the other side. Have you hidden something? Did you stain the soul of the woman? Are you man or something else? At the seventh beat, a cold wind swept through the courtyard. Leaves blew against their natural direction. The incense curled upward, into the shape of a serpent's tongue. The priest froze, eyes wide, unsure. A child screamed, "There's a snake in the smoke!" People backed away. Some clutched prayer beads. Others whispered their mother's name in fear. The priest finally spoke. The ancestors have not allowed us to deliver judgment, but this is not a good sign. Maleko stood, brushed the ash from his shoulders. No protest, no tears, only one sentence. If my soul is not clean enough, then let the river cleanse it. They watched him walk away from the altar, tall, alone, like the shadow of a fallen god, banished from the heavens. That night, no one slept peacefully, because everyone knew some truths don't need answers, only fear to live on. When a community doesn't understand a gift, they will always call it a curse. In the village of Ntoba, there was one thing holier than fire. Water. Water was the blood of the motherland, the soul of the living, the one element that could never be bribed. And then it vanished. The Mbalu River, which had flowed through Ntoba since before the ancestors had even named the sun, began to dry. Day by day, section by section. First, the fish died. Then the fields cracked open. Children burned with fever as the wells turned salty. Then the cows, the goats, the chickens collapsed one by one. Fear gripped the village. The elders called an emergency council. Eyes swollen red from tears no one would admit to shedding. Priest Mba arrived, carrying the book of prophecy, worn, singed, and passed down through 17 generations of spirit keepers. He turned to the final page. Faded ink, blurred script, but still legible. When the Mbalu bleeds dry and the people can no longer see their own reflection, the one who was cast out is the one who was chosen. Silence dropped like a tombstone. Everyone knew who the words pointed to. Someone whispered, "Could it be Maleko?" Another snapped, "Impossible. He's the reason for all this. He can't be the cure." Priest Mba spoke with iron in his voice. To the spirits, the one who carries the burden often carries the duty too. The next day, the villagers came to Maleko's hut. Before, they came to scorn. Now, they came to beg. Old Lambo, the village elder, dropped to his knees, forehead pressed to the dirt. "Maleko, if you truly are the chosen one, please, save the river, save all of us." Maleko looked around. His eyes paused on every face. The same ones who once avoided him, who once quietly judged. No anger, no bitterness, just a quiet question. "If I die during the ritual, will you still call me cursed?" No one answered. Maleko rose, stepped out of the hut, carrying nothing but the leather bracelet passed down from his ancestors, the one he had never taken off, until the night Zahira left. At the bank of the Mbalu, now just a stretch of dark, choking mud, the villagers stood in a sacred circle. The priest drew protective symbols using black hen blood and crushed wormwood leaves. Maleko stepped into the circle, removed his shirt, bowed low, forehead to earth. The ritual began. 3 rounds of drums, 7 ancient invocations. A small blade etched a line across his chest, his blood dripping into the dry, cracked earth. The priest cried out, "Spirit of water, spirit of blood, take this bearer of burden. If the life force within him is true, return the Mbalu to the people." Wind rose, not a normal breeze, but a cold spiral from beneath the soil, as if something had just exhaled. The sky darkened. Clouds gathered, Lightning struck across the riverbank. The drums fell silent. And then, a jet of water burst from the ground. Small, but pure, clean, alive. The villagers wept. A child dove into the mud and laughed hysterically when their feet touched water. The oldest woman in Ntoba sank to her knees, not crying, not speaking, just lifting her hands, as if cradling the face of a long-lost son. Maleko remained kneeling, head bowed. The priest approached, gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rise. You are no longer cursed. You have been chosen. Some are not born to be accepted, but to redeem those who once cast them aside. Far to the west of Mount Kisanga, where red dust swirls in the wind like smoke, where the sun rises late as if tired of itself, lies the kingdom of Komoru. There, the people say, no one can satisfy Princess Ayana unless touched by the gods themselves. Ayana was the only daughter of King Ikon, the oldest ruler of Komoru, known as the Wind Swallower, for once riding through the desert for 3 days without water. She was born in silk, raised in the shadow of the throne, taught to dance to the drums of her ancestors, and learned to speak with her eyes before she ever used her tongue. But no man who entered her chambers ever left with a smile. Some whispered Ayana carried the curse of the serpent's womb, where pleasure vanished before it even bloomed. Others said she was hexed by a woman once rejected by King Ikon, because she was too intelligent. The truth? No one knew. All they knew was Ayana lived alone, in a palace full of laughter. She had tried to love, tried to open, tried to give, but every man left, not because she lacked, but because she was too much. One night, as King Ikon coughed violently on a bed of silk and ilang-ilang incense, Ayana held his hand, and for the first time, wept. "Father, if I must live without love, then I'd rather fall with you than survive, frozen like stone." King Ikon looked deep into her eyes. "I've conquered all 4 winds, but I've never met anyone like you. You don't need an ordinary man. You need someone cursed, just like you." And then came the rumor that in the distant village of Ntoba, there lived a man who bore a sacred burden, a man who revived an entire river with nothing but the force of his body. His name was Maleko. When Ayana heard it, something inside her stirred, like a thread being pulled tight by an invisible god. "Father, summon him." But Maleko refused. He didn't want to be another royal curiosity, didn't want to be therapy for a woman born to be worshipped. "I'm not a gift for others to unwrap," he told the messenger. King Ikon nodded, not angry, he understood. To meet someone like Maleko, you don't summon, you go. And so, during the season of dry winds, the people of Komoru arrived in Ntoba, black horses draped in silk, lion-skin drums echoing through the forest, servants bearing chests of gemstones, peacock feathers, oud wood, and dew-distilled wine. The villagers had never seen such strangeness, such splendor. And among them, Ayana stepped down from a golden litter. She said nothing, just looked. Her gaze felt like it peeled off your outer skin, searching for what lay beneath. Blood or wind. Maleko stepped out of his hut, wearing nothing but a hemp loincloth and the leather band of his ancestors. He looked at her, she looked at him. No words, but the entire village felt it. Something had shifted. Ayana walked closer, lifted her face, and spoke softly, just enough for him to hear. "You carry a curse no one can bear. I carry a curse no one dares to touch. But what if 2 curses meet and become something holy?" Maleko didn't answer. He simply nodded, gently, as if, for the first time, he felt understood. Sometimes, it's not 2 healed people who find each other, but 2 cursed souls who finally realize they just might be each other's cure. That night, the moon rose full, round, like the mouth of an ancient god whispering secrets to the world. No wind. The forest stood still. Even the crickets held their breath, as if they knew something was about to happen. Maleko didn't sleep. He couldn't. From the moment Ayana looked at him with that gaze, the gaze of someone who didn't wonder, but recognized. Something stirred inside him. Not desire, not longing, but something older than want. The instinct to see yourself through someone else's eyes. No one called him. No one led him. But his feet moved on their own, carrying him toward the Mbalu River, where water had returned, where he once knelt and bled, where the ancestors tested him with a silence that lasted half a lifetime. When he reached the riverbank, Ayana was already there. No cloak, just her dark skin, shining beneath the moonlight, her thick curls falling like a river down her back. She stood waist-deep in the water, eyes closed, as if whispering something only her spirit could hear. Maleko didn't speak. He removed his cloth and stepped into the water, quietly. The river was cold, but the shiver that ran through him wasn't from the chill. It was from being waited for, not with words, but with presence. When he came close, Ayana opened her eyes. She didn't speak. She just looked and reached out her hand. Maleko placed his hand in hers. No one had to teach them what came next. Their bodies remembered the language of souls. She touched the scar on his chest, where the ceremonial blade once drew blood for the ancestors. He kissed her shoulder, where some forgotten prince once bit her, thinking power was permission. And they became one. No rush, no fear, no force, only the sound of water around them, like the quiet voices of their ancestors, blessing the moment. Maleko entered her, not with strength but with permission. No cries, no pain, just breath, deep, slow, and ancient. Ayana wrapped her arms around him, eyes open, lips moving, but no words, just stay. There were no drums that night, no witnesses, only the moon and the river Mbalu to remember what happened. The moment when two cursed souls uncursed each other. They didn't return to the village, didn't speak to anyone. They lay on the flat rocks beside the river, hands clasped, foreheads touching, and slept, like two souls reborn after a long, forgotten life. Not everyone deserves a miracle, but sometimes pain is the spell that makes one appear. The dawn in Ntoba rose slowly, as if the sun itself didn't want to intrude. Not on this morning, not after a night where two souls had finally found each other. Not through flesh, but through forgiveness. Ayana woke first. She turned. Maleko was still asleep, bare-backed, breathing softly. His face, at peace. The peace of a child who no longer dreams adult dreams. She gently placed her hand on his chest, right where the ritual scar remained. But now, beneath it, a heartbeat. Not the beat of a man carrying a burden, but of a man who had finally found where he could give all of himself. When Maleko opened his eyes, they said nothing, because some nights are not meant to be spoken, only remembered. But that morning they couldn't hide from the world. The villagers of Ntoba had gathered in the ceremonial yard. King Akon, Ayana's father, along with the elders of Kamoru, had come to formally express gratitude for the royal welcome. Priest Mba struck the drums. Elder Lambo stepped forward. King Ikon sat upon a carved wooden throne, etched with a serpent coiled around the sun, the royal seal of Kamoru. Ayana and Maleko walked out together, not holding hands, but side by side, like two stone pillars beneath the same sacred roof. In the center of the village square, King Ikon rose, his voice deep, steady, and regal. Today we do not come to ask, we come to listen. There is something my daughter wishes to say to both of our people, something too heavy to be left in the heart. Ayana stepped forward. A breeze brushed through her hair like it too was waiting for an answer. She looked around, at the silence that held its breath, then turned to Maleko. The man once called cursed, the one who never ran when others fled, the one who stayed. "Last night," she began, voice calm, "a spirit entered me. Not a demon, not a god, but a man who knew how to love with patience and melt me without ever needing to touch. That man is Maleko, and I was the one who stepped into the river. I was the one who chose him." The village froze. Then came murmurs. Then a single clap from Priest Emba. Then another, and another, until the whole crowd joined, as if every judgment had just been rinsed clean by a single brave confession. Maleko stepped forward, facing the villagers. No speech, no philosophy, just the one truth he'd once wished he could say aloud. "All my life, I thought I couldn't love anyone. Not because I didn't know how, but because no one stayed long enough to receive the love I had. But yesterday, this woman didn't run, and I understood. Love doesn't come from being normal enough. It comes from seeing each other, even when the world told us to look away." Ayana looked at him, her lips trembled. Then she said, "No mic, no priest, no permission. Maleko, if your curse is what woke me up, then I choose to be cursed with you. For life. Some love stories don't need flowers, just a scar, and someone willing to call it beautiful. In Africa, when two people fall in love, it's a matter of the heart. But when they are allowed to marry, it becomes a matter of bloodlines, generations, tribes, and even the gods." After Ayana's declaration before the village, no one doubted her love for Maleko. But love was only the beginning. To marry, they needed the blessing of heaven and earth. King Ikon and Elder Lambo sat across from each other beneath the ancient Mbangi tree, where generations of Ntoba had once made peace with a single oath, where wars ended not with swords, but with a drop of shared blood. Between them lay a white buffalo hide, and upon it 4 sacred symbols of life: a bowl of water from the Mbalu River, where Maleko had been reborn; a cup of ash, what Ayana had buried in order to love again; a handful of soil from Komoru, so that promises would not forget their roots; and a single black feather, to ask the sky for flight that never breaks. Priest Emba stood between them, reading the ancestral vow: when blood meets water, when soil greets wind, when the untouchable is touched, marriage is no longer the union of two, but of 2 worlds. At the final word, Maleko stepped forward, took the bowl of river water, and poured half into the ash. The mixture hissed and bubbled, as if speaking in a language only the ancestors could understand. Ayana stepped forward next. She placed the black feather into the center of the bowl. The village held its breath. The sky was still. The wind stopped. And then a single blackbird flew overhead, calling out once, only once, and everyone knew. The ancestors had said yes. The drums began. Not the usual celebration drums, but the Adua rhythm, played only when 2 tribes chose alliance over war. That same night the wedding was held. No wedding dress, no cake, only fire, water, earth, and wind, and hundreds of hands clapping, voices singing, and tears falling from those who had witnessed an entire generation healed by a single embrace between 2 people once deemed unlovable. King Ikon stood before the village and declared, "From this day forward, Komoru and Ntoba are not 2 paths, but 2 branches of the same river. And Maleko, the son chosen by water, is now the Prince of Thunder of Komoru." Maleko stood there, not with his chin raised like the princes before him, but with Ayana's hand in his eyes red, his heart beating like the drums echoing through the forest. "I've lived my whole life waiting for someone brave enough to touch what the world called too much. Today, I am no longer alone. When one is truly seen and the other dares to stay, no crown is needed. They are already king and queen of each other." Every season in Ntoba has its own voice. The dry season cracks with the sound of breaking earth. The rainy season drums on thatched rooftops. But the season when Ayana was with child was a season where everything began to bloom. No one needed to ask if she was pregnant. They knew. The corn stood taller than the year before. Birds nested on the roof of Maleko's hut, and the Mbaloo River ran so clear you could see fish swimming at the bottom. A sight not seen in 2 full generations. Ayana didn't hide her belly. She walked through the village like a goddess, carrying not just a child, but the future itself. No veil, no shame. She wore her pregnancy like prophecy, as if the life inside her was not just flesh and blood, but the sky's response to everything the world had once denied. Maleko, meanwhile, was quieter than ever. He didn't speak much, but everyone noticed. His eyes had changed. Gone was the gaze of a man once cursed. Now, he looked like a man guarding something sacred. One morning, Priest Mba came to visit. He brought with him a bowl of water, drawn from the very day the Mbaloo River returned. He placed his hand on Ayana's belly and whispered, "This child is of 2 worlds, born of the strength once rejected and the light found only in fearless love. This will not only be Maleko's child, it will be the child of both Ntoba and Komoru." 3 months later, the entire village celebrated. Not for a ritual, not for a harvest, but because Ayana was in labor. The eldest midwife in the land caught the child, then collapsed to her knees, tears streaming. "It didn't cry," she said. "It opened its eyes and stared at me, as if it had already seen everything." Maleko stepped into the village square, carrying the newborn. He raised it under the full moon. No one clapped, no one cheered. They fell to their knees. A man once cursed, now held the future in his arms. A man who once could touch no one was now the cradle of a new lineage. Old King Ekon stepped forward, his bones tired, but his voice firm. He placed his hand on Maleko's shoulder. "From this day forward, you are not just my son-in-law, you are the crown heir of Komoru." Maleko said nothing. He turned to Ayana, still weak, resting, and whispered, "I used to believe this body could only bring pain, but you turned it into a place where miracles are born." Ayana smiled. "We were never cursed, Maleko. We were just made for each other. And the world was wrong." From that day on, the villagers no longer called Maleko the burdened one. They called him he who sowed the seed of the gods. Because some stories aren't told to warn. They are told to prove that life always finds a way, even if it has to crawl through every scar to get there. Every village has a song only the elders remember, a story whispered only by firelight, and a name no one dares speak unless they're ready to believe in the extraordinary. In Ntoba, that name was once Maleko, the burdened one. In Komoru, it was Ayana, the one no man dared to love. But time rewrites everything. 10 years after their wedding, they were no longer symbols of pity. They were living proof that no body is a curse, only those who haven't yet been seen in truth. Maleko and Ayana had 19 children. 3 became healers, 2 became warriors, and 1 was known across the continent as the boy who heard stone, because he could sense earthquakes a week before they struck. The villagers rewrote the book of ceremonies. They added a new chapter called The Union of the Once Rejected, and in that chapter, one old law was struck through. Those who cannot love should not bear children. In its place, it is the love that comes hardest, that gives birth to the strongest souls. Before Priest Mba took his final breath, he passed the ancestral charm to his son and said, "Teach your children that sometimes a god arrives in the body of the one everyone once feared." Ntoba rebuilt the legendary circle, a shrine of stone, wood, and sacred bark, where children are taught the story of Ayana, who touched a man the whole village once cast aside. And from that single touch, water returned, the earth bloomed, and people learned to believe in beauty after the scar. On the day of Mbaloo, that year, Maleko, now silver-haired, was invited into the village square. No one asked him to speak. But still, he spoke. "I was once seen as a monster, but I never held anger, because when people fear what they don't understand, they step back. Ayana stepped forward. She didn't choose me because I was special. She chose to stay. And that choice was the greatest miracle of my life. Ayana, seated nearby, cradling their first grandchild, smiled. It was the smile of someone who had lived long enough to know, love doesn't complete us. We were always whole, the moment we dared to love. The villagers began a new ritual. They pressed their fingers gently to each other's foreheads, a tradition their children invented. They called it the Mark of Maleko, a blessing for anyone who's ever felt too much to be loved. And from that day on, the name Maleko was no longer just a man. It became a legend, a symbol. When you think you're cursed, remember, maybe you're just waiting for someone brave enough to stay. Maleko did not die in battle. He didn't fall ill under the moon. The gods didn't summon him back in thunder or lightning. He left, in silence, on a soft afternoon, while the Mbalu River still flowed gently, and his youngest grandchild was laughing wildly after toppling over a baby goat. Ayana sat beside him. She held his hand, the same hand that once made an entire village tremble. Now, just the hand of an old man, warm, calloused, trembling only when the wind changed. "You know," he whispered, voice thin like dry leaves, "I once thought I'd die and no one would want to be buried with me. But now, if I must go, I'll carry with me a song that carries your voice in it." Ayana smiled. She didn't cry. She understood. Death doesn't take. It simply moves a person into another drawer of those who still remember. Their children, their grandchildren, the entire village gathered. Torches were lit. The ancient Mbangi drums were played, not in the rhythm of mourning, but in the rhythm of rebirth. The king of Komoru at the time, Maleko and Ayana's firstborn, ordered the building of the Sanctuary of Union on the very ground where Maleko once knelt to save the river. Inside that sanctuary, they carved a single line in the ancient language of both tribes. They were once rejected, but they taught us to love deeper than we fear. On the first anniversary of Maleko's passing, a group of village youth wrote a song. They called it The Song of the One Who Stayed. It was sung in the blended tongue of Ntoba and Komoru. If the world has no room for the unusual, then we will make the world again, with an embrace, with patience, with hands that dare to hold what others let go. Ayana, now silver-haired and dim-eyed, often sat beneath the old Mbangi tree, where the wind from the river still felt like Maleko's hand stroking her hair. Whenever a child asked, "Grandmother, was it true Maleko carried a curse?" she would smile and say, "No, child. He carried a gift. But it took the right person to see it as one." And so, the generations that followed no longer feared the word curse. They no longer feared their difference. They no longer feared being misunderstood. Because they had grown up with the story of Maleko and Ayana, love doesn't always come from comfort. Sometimes, it arrives when we dare to face what no one else dares name, and choose to stay anyway. This isn't just a story about love. It's a story about forgiving yourself. If you've ever felt too different, if you've ever been feared by others, if you've ever believed you were unlovable, remember, there was once a man named Maleko who thought the same. But when someone chose to stay, the world gave him a new name. And one day, the world will rename you too. If something in your heart just stirred, leave a comment. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting to be seen through your eyes. Tales of Black, where black legends are not told in glory, but through the scars that became miracles. Subscribe, so you never miss the stories you were never told.